Chapter 3. Eve didn't waste time. Her first order of business when she hit her office was to contact Nadine first. The A-link buzzed and crackled over the galactic channel. Sunspots, a satellite link, or simply the aging equipment held up the transmission for several minutes. Finally, a picture wavered onto the screen, then popped into clear focus. Eve had the pleasure of seeing Nadine's paled, groggy face. She hadn't considered the time difference. Dallas. Nadine's normally fluid voice was scratchy and weak. Jesus, it's the middle of the night here. Sorry, you awake? Nadine, awake enough to hate you. Have you been getting Earth news up there? I've been a little busy. Nadine pushed back her tumbled hair and reached for a cigarette. When did you start that? With a wince, Nadine drew in the first drag. If you terrestrial cops ever came up here, you'd give tobacco a shot. Even this dog shit you can buy in this rat hole, and anything else you could get your hands on. It's a fucking disgrace. She hitched in more smoke. 3 people to a cage, most of them zoned on smuggled chemicals. The medical facilities are like something out of the 20th century. They're still sewing people up with string, and limited video privileges. Eve finished. Imagine treating murderers like criminals. My heart's breaking. You can't get a decent meal anywhere in the entire colony. Nadine griped. What the hell do you want? To make you smile. Nadine, how soon will you be finished up there and back on planet? Depends. As she began to waken fully, Nadine's senses sharpened. You have something for me. Prosecuting attorney Cicely Towers was murdered about 30 hours ago. Ignoring Nadine's yelp, Eve continued briskly. Her throat was slashed, and her body was discovered on the sidewalk of 144th between 9th and 10th. Towers. Jesus wept. I had a one-on-one with her 2 months ago after the Dublas case. 144th, the wheels were already turning. Mugging? Number. She still had her jewelry and credit tokens. A mugging in that neighborhood wouldn't have left her shoes behind. Number. Nadine closed her eyes a moment. Damn. She was a hell of a woman. Your primary? Right the first time. Okay. Nadine let out a long breath. So, why is the primary on what has to be the top case in the country contacting me? The devil you know. Nadine, your illustrious associate Morris is drooling down my neck. Asshole. Nadine muttered, tamping out the cigarette in quick, jerky bums. That's why I didn't get word of it. He'd have blocked me out. You play square with me. Nadine, I play square with you. Nadine's eyes sharpened, her nostrils all but quivered. Exclusive? We'll discuss terms when you get back. Make it fast. I'm practically on planet. Eve smiled at the blank screen. That ought to stick in your greedy craw. See. Jay, she mused. She was humming as she pushed away from her desk. She had people to see. By 9 a.m., Eve was cooling her heels in the plush living area of George Hammett's uptown apartment. His taste ran to the dramatic. She noted. Huge squares of crimson and white tiles were cool under her boots. The tinkling music of water striking rock sang from the audio of the hologram sweeping an entire wall with an image of the tropics. The silver cushions of the long, low sofa glittered, and when she pushed a finger into one, it gave like silken flesh. She decided she'd continue to stand. TLDR were placed selectively around the room, a carved tower that resembled the ruins of some ancient castle. The mask of a woman's face embedded in translucent rose-colored glass, what appeared to be a bottle that flashed with vivid, changing colors with the heat of her hand. When Hammett entered from an adjoining room, Eve concluded that he was every bit as dramatic as his surroundings. He looked pale, heavy-eyed, but it only increased his stunning looks. He was tall and elegantly slim. His face was poetically hollowed at the cheeks. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Eve knew him to be in his 60s. He had opted to let his hair gray naturally. An excellent choice for him, she thought, as his thick lion's mane was as gleaming a silver as one of Rourke's Georgian candlesticks. His eyes were the same striking color, though they were dulled now with what might have been grief or weariness. He crossed to her, cupped her hand in both of his. Eve. When his lips brushed her cheek, she winced. He was making the connection personal. She thought they both knew it. George, she began, subtly drawing back. I appreciate your time. Nonsense. I'm sorry I had to keep you waiting. A call I had to complete. He gestured toward the sofa, the sleeves of his casual shirt billowing with the movement. Eve resigned herself to sitting on it. What can I offer you? Nothing. Really? Coffee? He smiled a little. I recall you're very fond of it. I have some of Rourke's blend. He pressed a button on the arm of the sofa. A small screen popped up. A pot of Argentine gold. He ordered 2 cups. Then, with that faint and sober smile still on his lips, he turned back to her. It'll help me relax, he explained. I'm not surprised to find you here this morning, Eve. Or perhaps I should be calling you Lieutenant Dallas. Under the circumstances. Then you understand why I'm here. Of course, Cicely. I can't get used to it. His cream over cream voice shook a little. I've heard it countless times on the news. I've spoken with her children and with Marco. But I can't seem to take in the fact that she's gone. You saw her the night she was killed. A muscle in his cheek jerked. Yes, we had dinner. We often did when our schedules allowed. Once a week at least. More, if we could manage it. We were close. He paused as a small server droid glided in with the coffee. Hammett poured it himself, concentrating on the small task almost fiercely. How close? He murmured, and Eve saw his hand wasn't quite steady as he lifted his cup. Intimate. We'd been lovers, exclusive lovers, for several years. I loved her very much. You maintained separate residences. Yes, she and we both preferred it that way. Our tastes, aesthetically speaking, were very different, and the simple truth was we both liked our independence and personal space. We enjoyed each other more, I think, by keeping a certain distance. He took a long breath, but it was no secret that we had a relationship. At least not among our families and friends. He let the breath out. Publicly, we both preferred to keep our private lives private. I don't expect that will be possible now. I doubt it. He shook his head. It doesn't matter. What should matter is finding out who did this to her. I just can't seem to work myself up about it. Nothing can change the fact that she's gone. Cicely was, he said slowly, the most admirable woman I've ever known. Every instinct, human and cop, told her this was a man in deep mourning, but she knew that even killers mourn their dead. I need you to tell me what time you last saw her. George, I'm recording this. Yes, of course. It was about 10 o'clock. We had dinner at Robert's on East 12th. We shared a cab after. I dropped her off first. About 10. He repeated. I know I got in about quarter after because I had several messages waiting. Was that your usual routine? What? Oh. He snapped himself back from some inner world. We really didn't have one. Often we'd come back here, or go to her apartment. Now and again, when we felt adventurous, we'd take a suite at the palace for a night. He broke off, and his eyes were suddenly blank and devastated as he shoved off the soft, silver sofa. Oh God. My God. I'm sorry. Useless. She knew, against grief. I'm so sorry. I'm starting to believe it, he said in a voice thick and low. It's worse, I realize, when you begin to believe it. She laughed when she got out of the cab, and she blew me a kiss from her fingertips. She had such beautiful hands, and I went home, and forgot about her because I had messages waiting. I was in bed by midnight. Took a mild drink because I had an early meeting. While I was in bed, safe, she was lying dead in the rain. I don't know if I can bear that. He turned back, his already pale face bloodless now. I don't know if I can bear it. She couldn't help him. Even though his pain was so tangible she could feel it herself, she couldn't help him. I wish I could do this later, give you time, but I just can't. As far as we know, you're the last person who saw her alive, except her killer. He drew himself up. Unless, of course, I killed her. It would be best for everyone if I ruled that out quickly. Yes, naturally, it would, Lieutenant. She accepted the bitterness in his voice and did her job. If you could give me the name of the cab company so that I can verify your movements. The restaurant called for one. I believe it was a Rapid. Did you see or speak with anyone between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m.? I told you, I took a pill and was in bed by midnight. Alone. She could verify that with the building security discs. Though she had reason to know such things could be doctored. Can you tell me her mood when you left her? She was a bit distracted. The case she was prosecuting. Optimistic about it. We talked a bit about her children, her daughter in particular. Myrina's planning on getting married next fall. Cicely was pleased with the idea, and excited because Myrina wanted a big wedding with all the old-fashioned trimmings. Did she mention anything that was worrying her? Anything or anyone she was concerned about? Nothing that would apply to this. The right wedding gown, flowers, her hopes that she could swing the maximum sentence in the case. Did she mention any threats, any unusual transmissions, messages, contacts, number? He put a hand over his eyes briefly, let it drop to his side. Don't you think I'd have told you if I had the slightest inkling of why this happened? Why would she have gone to the Upper West Side at that time of night? I have no idea. Was she in the habit of meeting snitches? Sources? He opened his mouth and closed it again. I don't know, he murmured, struck by it. I wouldn't have thought a broken bar, but she was so stubborn, so sure of herself. Her relationship with her former husband, how would you describe it? Friendly, a bit reserved, but amiable. They were both devoted to the children, and that united them. He was a little annoyed when we became intimate. But a broken bar. Hammett broke off, stared at Eve. You can't possibly think a broken bar with what might have been a laugh. He covered his face. Marco Angelini skulking around that neighborhood with a knife, plotting to kill his ex? No, Lieutenant. He dropped his hands again. Marco has his flaws, but he'd never hurt Cicely, and the sight of blood would offend his sense of propriety. He's much too cold, much too conservative to resort to violence, and he'd have no reason, no possible motive for wishing her harm. That, Eve thought, was for her to decide. She tripped from one world to another by leaving Hammett's apartment and going to the West End. Here she would find no silvery cushions, no tinkling waterfalls. Instead there were cracked sidewalks, ignored by the latest Spruce Up the City campaign, graffiti-laced buildings that invited the onlookers to fuck all manner of man and beast. Storefronts were covered by security grills, which were so much cheaper and less effective than the force fields employed in the posher areas. She wouldn't have been surprised to see a few rodents overlooked by the feline droids that roamed the alleyways. Of the two-legged rodents, she saw plenty. One camelhead grinned at her tittily and rubbed his crotch proudly. A street hawker sized her up quickly and accurately as Cop ducked his head under the wreath of feathers he sported around his magenta hair, and scurried off to safer pastures. A selected list of drugs were still illegal. Some cops actually bothered to pay attention. At the moment, Eve wasn't one of them, unless a little arm twisting helped her get answers. The rain had washed most of the blood away. The sweepers from the department would have sucked up anything in the immediate area that could be sifted through for evidence. But she stood for a moment over the spot where Towers had died, and she had no trouble envisioning the scene. Now, she needed to work backward. Had she stood here, Eve wondered, facing her killer? Most likely. Did she see the knife before it sliced across her throat? Possibly, but not quickly enough to react with anything more than a jerk, a gasp. Lifting her gaze, Eve scanned the street. Her skin prickled, but she ignored the stares of those leaning against the buildings or loitering around rusting cars. Cicely Towers had come uptown, not by cab. There was, to date, no record of a pickup or drop-off from any of the official companies. Eve doubted she would have been foolish enough to try a gypsy. The subway, she deduced. It was fast and, with the scanners and droid cops, safe as a church, at least until you hit the street. Eve spotted the signal for the underground less than half a block away. The subway, she decided. Maybe she was in a hurry, annoyed to be dragged out on a wet night. Sure of herself, as Hammett had said, she wouldn't have been afraid. She marched up the stairs to the street in her power suit, her expensive shoes. She dashed, stopping. Eve narrowed her eyes. No umbrella. Where was her damn umbrella? A meticulous woman, a practical, organized woman didn't go out in the rain without protection. Briskly, Eve pulled out her recorder and muttered note to herself to check on it. Was the killer waiting for her on the street? In a room? She studied the disintegrating brick of the unrehabbed buildings. A bar? One of the flesh clubs? Hey, white girl. Browsing it, Eve turned at the interruption. The man was tall as a house, and from the deepness of his complexion, a full black. He sported, as many did in this part of town, feathers in his hair. His cheek tattoo was vivid green and in the shape of a grinning human skull. He wore an open red vest and matching pants snug enough to show the bulge of his cock. Hey, black boy, she said in the same casually insulting tone. He flashed a wide, dazzling grin at her from an unbelievably ugly face. You looking for action? He jerked his head toward the garish sign of the all-nude club across the street. You a little skinny, but they be hiring. Don't get many white as you, mostly mixed. He chucked her under the chin with fingers the width of soy wieners. I be the bouncer. Put in a word for you. Now why would you do that? Out of the goodness of my heart, and 5% of your tips. Honeypot, a long white girl like you make plenty jiggling her stuff. I appreciate the thought, but I've got a job. Almost with regret, she pulled out her badge. He whistled through his teeth. Now how come I don't be seeing that? White girl, you just don't smell like cop. Must be the new soap I'm using. Got a name? They just call me Crack. That's the sound it makes when I bust heads. He grinned again, and illustrated by bringing his two huge hands together. Crack. Get it? I'm catching on. Were you on the door night before last? Crack. Now, I'm sorry to say I was otherwise engaged, and missed all the excitement. That be my night off, and I spent it catching up on cultural events. And those events were Vampire Flick Festival down to Gramercy, with my current young nibble. I sure do enjoy watching them bloodsuckers, but I hear we had ourselves a show right here. Got ourselves a dead lawyer. Big, important, fancy one, too. White girl, wasn't she? Just like you, honeypot. That's right. What else do you hear? Me? He trailed a finger down the front of his vest. The nail on his index finger was sharpened to a lethal point and painted black. I'm too dignified to listen to street talk. I bet you are. Understanding the rules, Eve slipped a 100 credit token from her pocket. How about I buy a little of that dignity? Well, the price. She looks right. His big hand enveloped the tokens and made them disappear. I hear she was hanging around in the 5 moons along about midnight, give or take, like she was hanging for somebody who don't show. Then she ditched. He glanced down at the sidewalk. Didn't go far though, did she? No, she didn't. Did she ask for anyone? Not so's I heard. Anyone see her with anyone? Bad night. People stay off the street mostly. Some cummy heads maybe wander, but business going to be slow. You know anyone around here who likes to cut? Plenty carry blades and stickers. White girl. His eyes rolled in amusement. Why you going to carry if you ain't going to use? Anybody just likes to cut, she repeated. Somebody who doesn't care about making a score. His grin spread again. The skull on his cheek seemed to nod with the movement. Everybody cares about making a score. Ain't you trying to? She accepted that. Who do you know around here who's out of a cage recently? His laugh was like mortar fire. Better if you ask. Don't I know anybody who ain't? And your money's done. All right. To his disappointment, she took a card rather than more tokens out of her pocket. There may be more if you hear anything I can use. Keep it in mind. You decide you want to earn a little extra shaking those little white its. You let Crack know. With this, he loped across the street with the surprising grace of an enormous black gazelle. Eve turned and went in to try her luck at the 5 moons. The dive might have seen better days, but she doubted it. It was strictly a drinking establishment, no dancers, no screens, no videos booths. The clientele who patronized the 5 moons weren't there to socialize. From the smell that slapped Eve the moment she stepped through the door, burning off stomach lining was the order of the day. Even at this hour, the small, square room was well populated. Silent drinkers stood at stingy pedestals knocking back their poison of choice. Others huddled by the bar, closer to the bottles. Eve rated a few glances as she crossed the sticky floor. Then people got back to the business of serious drinking. The bartender was a droid, as most were, but she doubted this one had been programmed to listen cheerfully to the customers' hard luck stories. More likely an arm breaker, she mused, sizing it up as she sidled up to the bar. The manufacturers had given him the tilted eye, golden-skinned appearance of a mixed race. Unlike most of the drinkers, the droid didn't sport feathers or beads, but a plain white smock over a wrestler's body. Droids couldn't be bribed, she thought with some regret, and threats had to be both clever and logical. Drink? The droid demanded. His voice had a ping to it, a slight echo that indicated overdue maintenance problems. Number. Eve wanted to keep her health. She showed her badge and had several customers shifting toward corners. There was a murder 2 nights ago. Not in here. But the victim was. She was alive then. At some signal Eve didn't catch, the droid took a smudged glass from a drinker mid-bar, poured some noxious-looking liquid into it, and slid it back. You were on duty. I'm a 24/7, he told her. indicating he was programmed for full operation without required rest or recharge periods. Did you ever see the victim before? In here, around the area? Number. Who did she meet here? No one. Eve drummed her fingers on the cloudy surface of the bar. Okay, let's just make this simple. You tell me what time she came in, what she did, when she left, and how she left. I am not required to maintain surveillance on the customers. Right. Slowly, Eve rubbed a finger on the bar. When she lifted it, she pursed her lips at the smear of gunk staining the tip. I'm homicide, but I'm not required to overlook health violations. You know, I think if I called the censor bugs in here, and they did a sweep, why they'd be shocked. So shocked they delete the liquor license. As threats went, she didn't think it was particularly clever, but it was logical. The droid took a moment to access the probabilities. The woman came in at 0:16. She didn't drink. She left at 1:12. Alone. Did she speak to anyone? She said nothing. Was she looking for someone? I didn't ask. Eve lifted a brow. You observed her. Did it appear she was looking for someone? It appeared. But she found no one. But she stayed nearly an hour. What did she do? Stood, looked, frowned, checked her watch often, left. Did anyone follow her outside? Number. Absently, Eve scrubbed her soiled finger on her jeans. Did she have an umbrella? The droid looked as surprised by the question as droids were capable of looking. Yes, a purple one, the same color as her suit. Did she leave with it? Yes, it was raining. Eve nodded, then worked her way through the bar, questioning unhappy customers. All she really wanted when she returned to Cop Central was a long shower. An hour in the 5 moons had left what felt like a thin layer of muck on her skin. Even her teeth, she thought, running her tongue over them. But the report came first. She swung into her office, then stopped, studying the wiry-haired man sitting at her desk plucking candy almonds from a bag. Nice work if you can get it. Feeney crossed the feet he'd propped on the edge of her desk. Good to see you, Dallas. You're a busy lady. Some of us cops actually work for a living. Others just play computer games all day. You should have taken my advice and worked on your comp skills. With more affection than annoyance. She knocked his feet from the desk and plopped her butt down in the vacated space. You just passing by? I've come to offer my services, old pal. Generously, he held out the bag of nuts. She munched and watched him. He had a hangdog face, one he had never bothered to have enhanced. Baggy eyes, the beginning of jowls, ears that were slightly too big for his head. She liked it just the way it was. Why? Well, I got 3 reasons. First, the commander made an unofficial request. Second, I had a lot of admiration for the prosecutor. Whitney called you? Unofficially, Feeney explained it again. He thought that if you had someone with my outstanding skills working the data route with you, we'd tie this thing up faster. Never hurts to have a direct line to the Electronic Detection Division. She considered it, and because she knew Feeney's skills were indeed outstanding, she approved. Are you going to sign on the case officially or unofficially? That's up to you. Then let's make it officially, Feeney. He grinned and winked. I figured you'd say that. The first thing I need you to do is run the victim's A-Link. There's no record either on the log or on the security tapes that she had a visitor the night she was killed. So somebody called her, arranged the meet. Good as done. And I need a run on everybody she put away. Everybody? He interrupted, only slightly appalled. Everybody. Her face broke into sunny smiles. I figure you can do it in about half the time I could. I need relatives, loved ones, associates, too. Also cases in progress and pending. Jesus, Dallas. But he rolled his shoulders, flexed his fingers like a pianist about to play a concert. My wife's going to miss me. Being married to a cop sucks, she said, patting his shoulder. Is that what Rourke says? She dropped her hand. We're not married, Feeney merely hummed in his throat. He enjoyed seeing Eve's quick frown, quick nerves. So how's he doing? He's fine. He's in Australia. Her hands found their way into her pockets. He's fine. Caught the 2 of you on the news a few weeks ago, at some fancy do at the palace. You look real sharp in a dress, Dallas. She shifted uncomfortably, caught herself, and shrugged. I didn't know you took in the gossip channels. Love them, he said unrepentantly. Must be interesting, leading that high life. It has its moments, she muttered. Are we going to discuss my social life, Feeney? or investigate a murder. We'll have to make time to do both. He rose and stretched. I'll go run the check on the victim's A-link before I get started on the years of perps she put away. I'll be in touch, Feeney. When he turned at her door, she cocked her head. You said there were 3 reasons you wanted in. You only gave me 2. Number 3. I missed you, Dallas. He grinned. Damn if I haven't missed you. She was smiling when she sat down to work. Damn if she hadn't missed him, too.